They're perhaps the best known mythical creatures, with one version of them or another popping up amongst different religions, cultures, and so on and so forth. The common understanding that scholars have come to believe is that dragons have originated separately in different cultures, from Asia to Europe and even the Americas. Dragons are often mentioned in Abrahamic religions like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, where they are considered to be forces of chaos and evil. For instance, Saint George slaying a dragon is amongst the well-known Christian stories where dragons are concerned, whereas in Chinese and Japanese cultures, they are considered to be symbols of strength and good fortune. Perhaps an example of Carl Jung's collective unconscious at play? Well, whatever the case may be, the fact is that people around the world are in awe of dragons, so much so that they became an enduring part of more modern fantasy stories like J.R.R. Tolkien's Legendarium, The Chronicles of Narnia, Aragon, Harry Potter, and of course, George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire. In fact, it's notoriously difficult to find a fantasy story with no dragons in it, for they just add to the magic. Moreover, there is a commonality in how dragons are described here. They are these reptile-like creatures of monstrous proportions that are winged, horned, and most importantly, can breathe fire. So today, we're going to explore exactly what it is about dragons' anatomy that makes these mythical creatures breathe fire and some of their other fantastical abilities. But before we proceed any further, we'd like to request that you kindly like and subscribe to our channel. It's only a teeny tiny click for you, but it means a lot to us. The origins of dragons. How did they come into existence? Now, remember when we told you that dragons appear in almost all cultures? That's actually a fact. The first known dragons are said to be huge serpent-like creatures which were slain by gods. Now, this kind of description of dragons is most commonly found in Indo-European mythologies. While historians aren't exactly sure as to where dragons originated first, some say that the mythical dragons we've all come to know and perhaps even love were inspired by the discoveries of fossils of dinosaurs and other similar kinds of prehistoric animals that have since become extinct. Most scientists and historians do agree with the fact that serpentine-featured creatures of such mammoth proportions, equipped with the ability to breathe fire, could never have existed at all during the lifespan of this Earth. An interesting explanation for the existence of dragons in mythology and fantasy comes from David E. Jones, an anthropologist. He says that it's a natural tendency for people to fear predators like snakes and other reptiles, so it's this instinctive fear that led to the creation of the mythical dragons we've become acquainted with. In that same vein, another anthropologist, Adrian Mayer, says that dragons are nothing but exaggerations of the commonly feared reptiles like alligators, Komodo dragons, and the like. While modern fantasies have made us love dragons and look forward to their depictions on screen, dragons have almost always been associated with evil since their origins. Carl Jung presents an interesting explanation of this, as he says that dragons are the archetype of the enemy of the hero, which explains why dragons are slain by heroes in most of the mythical stories we know them in. Some interpretations of dragons have obviously gone against this archetype, and that's mainly because of the cultural interpretations of dragons. For instance, in Chinese stories, dragons are often depicted as wise and benevolent creatures. So, the gist of it is that we can't pinpoint a single origin story for dragons, and while their physical depictions are almost the same in every culture they appear in, slight differences, the way that they're portrayed can vary greatly between cultures. How do dragons' eyes work? The eyes have it, don't they? What's important to know about dragons is that they are first and foremost predators. They need very precise eyesight for coordination and hunting, which more or less indicates binocular vision. This is very similar to a Komodo dragon. Now, in most depictions of dragons, their eyes are kind of beautiful and even emotive. Isn't it often said that the eyes are the window to the soul? What's really interesting about dragons' eyes is that they appear to be like tiny flames in themselves, perhaps offering a peek into the literal fiery soul within, which brings us to... How do dragons breathe fire? The most interesting and deadliest aspect of dragons is that they breathe fire. Now, there are many almost scientific explanations for how these creatures are able to achieve this. Some say that dragons rely on ingesting sediment rocks and creating a spark from them, which, fueled by their hydrogen glands, ignites fire. Others say that it's more of a chemical reaction, as in dragons have a mechanism of digesting food which breaks it down into organic materials like methane. This methane is stored in their specialized lungs, which are specifically designed to hold gas. Whenever a dragon wants to breathe fire, methane mixes with phosphor and ignites fire as soon as it comes in contact with the air. Now, as scientific as these theories may be, they're also a little boring. I guess we all have our favorite explanations as to how dragons are able to breathe fire. In Game of Thrones, there's a handmaiden that actually tells the story, and it's one of our favorites. A handmaiden tells Daenerys Targaryen that once upon a time there were 2 moons in the sky, and these moons were eggs. One of the moons wandered too close to the sun and cracked, and out came a lot of dragons. These dragons drank the fire of the sun, and that's why they're able to breathe fire. The Lycian handmaiden was quickly shot down by Daenerys' other handmaidens, who claimed that the moon was a goddess. However, it was interesting enough for Daenerys, and we also think it's kind of a fantastic explanation for equally fantastic creatures. Now, fire is a dragon's first and foremost weapon, but fire isn't the only weapon that a dragon has. Fangs, claws, and horns also aid a dragon in attack, albeit to a lesser degree. How do the skeletons and wings of dragons work? Scientists have often said that something as large as a dragon cannot exist, and if it did, it definitely wouldn't be able to walk or fly, but boo-hoo, who cares, right? Hear us out. Dragons' skeletons and wings are designed to just work. Basically, a dragon's skeletal structure is comprised of a large concave-shaped head, very long neck, broad shoulders, strong legs, strong tail, and really huge wings. They have insanely strong muscles, which in the jaw region can easily crush bones, and in the chest region, these insanely strong muscles act as flight muscles. What's also interesting about dragons' skeletal structure is while their makeup is really strong, their bones are also kind of hollow and light, which allows them to easily take flight. Coming to their wings, dragons typically have 2 large leathery wings similar to those of a bat. However, unlike a bat where the wings are mainly supported only in 2 places, dragons are often supported 4 places. This allows their wings to accommodate their weight, but also allowing them to maintain flight. Moreover, if you've observed, what's interesting about dragon wings is that they are generally bigger than their bodies, which allows them to accommodate such huge mass. What dragons do when they want to take flight is that they kind of scoop the air with their wings, force themselves upwards and onward into the sky. Defense mechanisms of dragons. Dragons are mighty and wondrous, yet like all creatures, they do need defenses. The great G.K. Chesterton once said, "Fairy tales tell children the dragons can be killed." Well, even children know that dragons can be killed. Fortunately for dragons, they don't have a lot of enemies to fear. They're in danger from other dragons, very specialized weapons, and of course from heroes and gods. So you see, even the mightiest of dragons needs to have a defense mechanism in place, especially when they're younger and more vulnerable. Basically, all dragons have huge scales on their bodies, and these scales are hard to steal. They're the best for protecting the body against both tiny and extensive damages. Scales give the dragons their color as well, and the color is generally inherited from their parents. What's also interesting about scales is that they change their color during mating, and even to camouflage themselves if need be.
Where are you hiding?
Can dragons speak? Many, but not all dragons are capable of speech. Most of the dragons we come across in folklore, mythology, and fantasy are depicted as beasts, just like any other animal, albeit much stronger and much more intelligent. In more recent instances of dragons, like Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, dragons can't speak. However, they do other things, like choose their riders, experience emotions of their own as well as their riders, and so on and so forth. However, there are a few instances where dragons have the ability to speak. In Netflix's Damsel, starring Millie Bobby Brown, her character is thrown into a rather terrifying cave that's home to an even more terrifying fire-breathing dragon. However, this dragon can speak, and it was voiced by Shore Agdashlu. She said she used her diaphragms as it felt suited to a wounded dragon. While it might feel like there were a lot of other effects used on her voice, it really wasn't so. A fascinating piece of acting, and well done, we gotta say. There's another more well-known instance of a speaking dragon, and that's Smaug of Hobbit fame. Voiced by Benedict Cumberbatch, he's probably the most outspoken dragon in history. Now, what makes Smaug interesting, given his craze for treasure, and more specifically his ability to speak, is that he doesn't merely serve as a plot device like the Game of Thrones dragons or the House of the Dragon's dragons. In fact, he's a character in his own right, with his own personality and storyline. However, Smaug isn't the only dragon who speaks. Tolkien says that the dragons of Middle-earth are all generally pretty talkative. Something interesting is that Middle-earth's dragons don't actually speak English. Bilbo Baggins, the hobbit who gets his hand on the One Ring, is only able to understand Smaug after he puts on the One Ring. Middle-earth's dragons don't really have any language of their own. There's no consensus on whether dragons can speak or not. By and large, they don't. However, if a writer wants to give them the ability to speak, then it works as well. How does dragon reproduction work? It's generally said that when dragons want to mate, they fly high into the sky. Then they kind of engulf one another with their wings and go into a free fall. While their mating is unique, their reproduction mechanism is very similar to other reptiles. After mating, female dragons lay eggs, which then hatch after a certain incubation period. The incubation period of these eggs can be very long, even a couple thousand years or more, so we understand that hatching dragons is extremely difficult. How they hatch can vary. For instance, in A Song of Ice and Fire, the key to hatching dragons is blood magic, involving fire and blood, the exact words of House Targaryen. This is why, after the Dance of the Dragons, a civil war during which a dragon fought a dragon, it became nearly impossible for Targaryens to hatch dragon eggs. Many Targaryens died in the process, and they took a lot of other people with them too. The tragedy at Summerhall is one such instance, where King Aegon Targaryen's desire to hatch dragon eggs consumed the entire Summerhall castle, killing many within it. However, there are other theories regarding the way dragons reproduce apart from eggs. One of them's interesting. This theory is more Freudian, which holds that the tail of the dragon is male while the mouth of the dragon is female. A dragon, therefore, possesses the ability to impregnate itself. So basically, a dragon impregnates itself by swallowing its tail. Given that most dragon lore says it's actually quite difficult to determine a dragon's gender, this theory may actually hold some water. Anyways, now that we've arrived at gender, some have theorized that one way male dragons can be differentiated from female dragons is that they're larger and broader. Female dragons happen to be slightly more smaller and slender. Male dragons also happen to be more dominating and aggressive, while female dragons have a quieter aggression. However, this kind of understanding is very rudimentary at best. Major types of dragons and their powers. Dragons come in different shapes, colors, and sizes. They have their own unique appearances and powers. Here, we'll go through some of the major ones, beginning with the Asian dragon. Asian dragons are considered to be strong, friendly, and wise, and instead of being feared, they're treated with dignity and respect. Asian dragons are known to control different aspects of the world depending on where they're found. For instance, they can control the weather. The earth dragons are especially known for their ability to control water springs. Meanwhile, the underground dragons are meant to control the treasures, riches, and other material found beneath the earth's surface. Finally, there are the heavenly dragons, which are meant to protect the gods' skies and homes. There's also the Chinese dragon. This one is commonly associated with Chinese culture and serves as a symbol of power and good fortune. It's mostly long, with serpentine features, however, it doesn't usually have wings. The other well-known dragon is the Western, a large winged creature with serpentine features, long claws, and very large fangs. Its most feared ability is its flame breath. Now that we've learned about the dragons that are commonly depicted in different cultures and literature, let's get into some of the more basic types of dragons. Fire dragon. This is the most commonly known dragon, whose main power is that it can breathe fire and bring about destruction wherever it goes. Fire dragons are perhaps the most feared of all dragons, as nobody wants to be roasted to death, do they? That's one of the worst ways to die, and hence, this is one dragon that everybody wants to stay away from. Ice dragon. Now, this one is the opposite of the fire dragon. It's commonly connected with winter, snow, and just about anything cold. An ice dragon can breathe ice and freeze its opponents to death. Well feared, ice dragons are generally considered to be safer than fire dragons, but surely you wouldn't want to get on its bad side either. Water dragon. The water dragon is usually found underwater, and it has the ability to breathe underwater. Water dragons are considered to be as powerful as they are wise. Given that it lives underwater mostly, it doesn't pose much of a threat to other creatures like human beings. Earth dragon. The earth dragon is found beneath the earth's surface, and it is very powerful in that it has the ability to control the different aspects of the earth and even bring about earthquakes. However, earth dragons are usually considered to be protectors of the earth. Light dragon. Now, a light dragon is perhaps the most mystical and beautiful of all dragons. It's commonly connected with light and purity. It's usually silver or gold in color, while also having the unique ability to protect and heal. A light dragon is considered to be a guardian, and a dragon that symbolizes all that is pure and good. Dark dragon. Where there's light, there's dark. Or is that the other way around? Whatever the case, dark dragons are perhaps the most dangerous of all dragons. A dark dragon is the symbol of fear, evil, and ruin. It's usually black or purple in color, symbolic of its association with shadow, destruction, and death. Can anyone ride a dragon? Now, this is an interesting question. Dragons are incredible creatures commonly associated with power. However, in dragon lore, their power is usually wielded by dragon riders. So can anybody ride a dragon? Not really. Dragon riders are unique, powerful, and truly few and far between. A dragon rider is able to acquire this title via their close connection with dragons. The concept of the dragon rider can be traced back to an old Chinese myth, where figures like Yu would fly on their dragons like Ying Lung and explore the world and have adventures together. Similarly, dragon riding is also associated with the hero trope. This was popularized by Anne McCaffrey, who set out to subvert the common tropes associated with Western dragons. Soon, this idea of the hero riding on the dragon's back became widely popularized. You often get to see it in text and on screen, including the very famous Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon series. Now, specifically in A Song of Ice and Fire, which Game of Thrones and House of Dragon were based on, the common misconception is that anyone with Targaryen blood can ride a dragon. However, this isn't the case. In Old Valyria, where Targaryens originally are from, they happen to be one of the many families who own dragons. Before Valyrians discovered dragons, they were only shepherds. One day, they stumbled upon dragons amidst the volcanoes in their land. From then on, with magic, they came to bond with the dragons and ride on them. These bonds were maintained in the Valyrian bloodline as they were passed down from one generation to the next. With dragons by their side, they became the strongest and most advanced civilization until a catastrophic event brought about their doom. Only two families, the Targaryens and Valerians, were able to escape to Westeros from Valyria. And that's how Targaryens rose to prominence in Westeros, as they were the only ones with dragons and the ability to bond with them. Now, it must be said that Valyrian dragons are not the only dragons in Westeros. There are theories that dragons existed in Westeros even before the Targaryens came along. A case in point is Cannibal, who's been said to live on the Dragonstone even before Aegon the Conqueror arrived with his dragons. Now, if this is true, this kind of makes him the oldest living dragon in Westeros, albeit he's not considered to be older than Balerion the Black Dread. Anyway, back to the dragon riding in A Song of Ice and Fire. Basically, you gotta have Valyrian blood to mount a dragon. How large can a dragon get? What is the largest dragon? Dragons are generally depicted as beasts of epic proportions. However, this wasn't always the case. Dragon sizes can vary from one culture to the next, from one mythology to the next, and from one writer to the next. For instance, in Disney's Mulan, the dragon Mushu is a Chinese dragon who's depicted as very small and boisterous. Meanwhile, in the Pokemon series, Charizard, which is a dragon Pokemon, is said to be about 5'7", not that tall either. However, when we move on to high fantasy literature like Silmarillion and The Song of Ice and Fire, dragons are depicted as being insanely huge. When it comes to A Song of Ice and Fire, Balerion, the Black Dread, is the largest known dragon. Keep in mind that there could have been dragons larger than him in Old Valyria before its doom. Now, as per the lore, dragons never stopped growing, and Balerion grew about as large as any dragon can grow as he came to be over 200 years of age. He was said to be so large that just his shadow could engulf an entire town when he passed by them. His fangs were as long as swords, and his jaws were so huge that they had the ability to swallow an entire Auroch at once. And Aurochs, by any stretch of the imagination, were no small creatures. Doesn't it sound like he was a mighty beast? Yeah, but his size and mass became his enemy as he got older and older. When Viserys Targaryen, his last rider, came to claim him, it was said that he found it quite difficult to fly. He had become considerably slower. Now, another mighty dragon that we know of and fortunately do get to see in the House of the Dragons is Vhagar. Vhagar was the youngest of the three dragons at the time of Aegon's conquest, and by the time of the dance, she had grown almost as large as Balerion was during Aegon's conquest. However, as Vhagar did not survive the Dance of the Dragons, there's no telling how large she might have grown. Even King Viserys says that she had grown far too large for this world, but large and old as she was still the most fearsome beast in the dance. Now, coming to the largest dragon, it might come as a little bit of a surprise that it isn't Balerion. The title probably goes to Ancalagon the Black from the Silmarillion. Now get this, Ancalagon was the greatest of all dragons and even other winged creatures. If you thought Smaug was big, Ancalagon was at least 3 times larger than him. He was said to be as tall as a mountain, and his fall was said to have broken Thangorodrim, a volcanic mountain. It took the might of Arendelle and the power of gods to finally bring him down. Now, there are a few other contenders for the largest dragon out there as well, and one that comes to mind is King Ghidorah, a 3-headed alien dragon who's a nuke in himself. So what we can take away from this is that dragons can be of any size, as it's very subjective. From small, believable sizes to large, unbelievably big ones, it can be anything they want. For all, that's what imagination is for. What are the weaknesses of dragons? Dragons are these winged, horned, and scaled creatures, and some of them can also breathe fire or ice. So do they have any weaknesses? Surely, we know that any being that lives can be killed, and that goes for dragons too. However, their weaknesses largely depends on the mythology or the fantasy we're looking at. Since they're usually depicted as villainous creatures in mythology and fantasy, their biggest weakness is usually heroes. In well-known Germanic mythology, Siegfried slew Fafnir, a dragon, by stabbing it in the heart while it was in his pit. Meanwhile, in Silmarillion, Arendelle, along with gods like Valar, brought down Calagon. Another well-known dragon slayer is Turin, who slew the dragon Glaurung by striking it in its belly where it had no armor. These guys are really good at finding very small weaknesses that dragons have and exploiting them. Many such heroic dragon slayers can be found in mythology and fantasy. Coming to A Song of Ice and Fire, dragons are mostly vulnerable to other dragons. Smaller dragons are especially vulnerable to larger dragons, considering how Vagar made short work of Arax. However, we also see that in the Storming of the Pit incident, dragons are killed by small folk during an uprising. Meanwhile, Meraxes, Queen Rhaenys' dragon, was killed by a scorpion bolt that pierced her in the eye while they were in Dorne. However, George R.R. Martin says this was nothing more than a lucky shot. Dragons can also be slain by advanced weapons. How long can dragons live? Are they immortal? Dragons are not immortal, but how long they live varies amongst different mythologies and fantasies. Regardless, what can be ascertained is that they can live for really long periods of time, much longer than human beings. While some dragons can live for hundreds of years, some can live for thousands, or even as long as 5,000 years. Their lifespan varies, but dragons are generally not depicted as immortal beings. However, compared to humans, they live a very long and magical life. Marvelous verdict. So here we are, folks, a detailed analysis of dragons, their anatomies, and their powers. Fascinating creatures they are, quite popular too. What do you think about dragons? Do you think they're fascinating? Do you have any favorites? Are there any dragons you'd love to see us cover on this channel? Let us know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed our content, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.